All right, so we're here with the second grade team recording a unit assessment data analysis meeting. Say hello to the camera.
Hello.
All right, so this is the first time we've done this. The reason we're doing this is because, I come in and observe you guys, and it's only like a small snippet of your teaching and the kids learning, right? And also, like, even within that observation, it's hard to see like how well the kids are learning and grasping things. Whereas if we look at assessments, like we can see how all the kids learn, right, all the time. So it's actually a higher leverage form of coaching and feedback. Like, obviously I want to see how your lessons are going, the teaching moves and the intellectual engagement, but this is gonna, the great John Wooden said, you haven't taught it until the kids have learned it. You guys know who John Wooden is?
Oh.
UCLA basketball coach, UCLA best coach of all time, arguably. All right, so here's our process for today. Hold on, let me show this real quick. So we're gonna analyze unit assessment data and make a reteach plan. That's the big objective overall. Step one. So actually this time I chose questions for you just because like we have limited time. So we're actually gonna look at questions 2A, 2B, and 12 if we have a chance on the unit assessment. Because basically what I just did was I went into the assessment and I just looked for which questions did the kids struggle most with. And so, actually I chose 3B. Maybe we'll adjust here. Give me a second. Yeah, we'll also look at 3B. We'll actually start with that one and then maybe look at 2A and 2B as well. Okay. And then I brought up the assessments. We can look at that.
Okay. Oh yeah.
Okay. And actually, what we're gonna do? I think just to start learning the process, 2A and 2B will be like more fruitful. Because like, as with everything, like we're gonna do it together. And then the goal is for you guys to be able to do this on your own. We'll still do it as a team, but once you're able to do this on your own, you'll be able to do it with like exit tickets, weekly assessments, unit assessments, benchmarks. So our process is we're gonna 3 steps for these questions. What do students need to understand and do to be able to solve the problem correctly? So we're gonna basically create an exemplar response, but also like analyze like what's the exemplar thinking. Step 2, now the disadvantage of just having it on the spreadsheet is we don't have the student work in front of us. Like we'll move towards that next time, where we can actually analyze like what was the common misconception. But just because you guys are so tapped into what the students are doing as you're teaching, maybe we can do like a hypothesis almost. And then step 3, this is where the meat and potatoes is: how, when, and using what will you reteach and reassess? And then step 4, coming up with a spiral review plan. So first we're gonna look at the assessment, 2A and 2B. Okay. As you were grading this, do you remember the students struggling with this?
Yes.
Okay, so looking at a graph, part A, how many more daisies were planted than tulips? And then part B, how many more lilies or poppies were planted? Show your work. All right, so for part A, what would students need to be able to do to solve this correctly?
To understand the graph.
Interpret what kind of graph?
A bar graph.
Bar graph. What else? So interpret a bar graph.
Like determine the quantities. So know that like for lilies, it's to know how to use that part of reading the graph.
Okay.
And then understanding what operation to use to solve
the operation. Good.
With the operation, being able to see like the key vocabulary in the question to determine which operation they're using.
What words indicate what operation and what words indicate that?
So many more.
Which indicates
tells
what?
you that they're gonna look for the difference of the 2 daisies. So
Good.
if it's difference, it's subtraction.
Good. All right. And then part B.
Similar, the whole how many were planted. Well, I guess I focusing on the how many.
Uh-huh.
So seeing that like collective.
I do think the or confused them a lot.
Mm-hmm.
Yep, I actually remember that from teaching already third grade last year. It's the lilies or poppies, because typically we just teach it as like and, but it could be or, like this choice or that choice. So yeah, that's. Do you think it was the or that screwed them up on that?
Yeah.
Yeah, because I did notice part B, they did worse than part A. What about part A? What do you feel like they struggled most with? Was it the interpretation of the graph, or was it the operation?
For my room, it was the operation.
It was the operation?
My students were good with, I know this is this quantity, but when it came to applying that now to do the operation, they were, that's where the disconnect was.
So not knowing that how many more usually indicates subtraction?
Yes.
All right.
I want to say it's the same for me because they were able to write down the quantities for each flower on top
Got it.
or like on the bottom where the name is. And they're able to think of the answer, but they didn't know how they got there.
Okay, that makes sense. And then you said yours were able to read the, like actually interpret the quantities?
Yes. So the strategy we used was that when the first thing you do when you see the graph is to write the quantities. So you're able to visually see that. So when they were taking it right away, they were adding like, I know Lily says 2, putting it underneath the graph. It was now, what do I do with my numbers?
Got it. All right, so the beauty of reteach is, as you guys have shared, like students know some stuff. It's not like they don't know any of the concepts. So I always used to think about it as like you're zooming in on the point of confusion. So let's say my arm represents like, here's like no understanding at all, and here's like fully understand. So a mistake teachers make is they're like, oh, kids got this wrong. Let me reteach it from the very beginning. So, okay, students, I'm gonna show you how to interpret a graph. It's like, no, they know how to interpret a graph. So skip that part. So we're gonna just zoom into, into the part that they don't understand rather than starting right at the beginning. So, and then you can kind of think of it as like creating a learning objective just for the zoomed in part. So what would the learning objective be if we're just talking about the zoomed in part? Students will be able to what?
Could it be like students would be able to something about like operation? So like students would be able to identify when to use addition or subtraction.
Good.
Yeah. I guess identify when to use addition and subtraction while understanding the bar graph.
There you go. That's great. Let's use that one. So good start, good add-on, boom, magic together. Good. So yeah, so that would be the objective. Students will be able to understand when to use addition or subtraction while interpreting a bar graph. Now, little word of advice. Another mistake that teachers make is if you zoom in too close, it can work against the kid's conceptual understanding. So you don't just want to teach how many more means subtract, how many more means subtract, how many more means subtract, and then just do that with this graph. You also want to reemphasize the whole concept. So all of the different operations, right? And words that indicate those. So as you're reteaching it, I would still cover all the different operations because it's basically just addition and subtraction for second grade, so that you can reuse the same graph. Like that's the beauty with like graph problems. And so the mini lesson could be using like an anchor chart, or have you guys established an anchor chart with those keywords?
I have mini, not anchor chart, but mini posters with the with keywords that go with each sign. When we were doing the picture graph lesson, we did create a picture graph together. But I think that would be helpful with like retouching this of like identifying each specific part of the graph in that anchor chart.
Yeah, and that's a good anchor. Like I had in third grade, I had that anchor chart up the whole year, like the word problem. And again, we don't want to. Back in the day, we would just teach keywords. Like we want to teach the concept and like the visual representation, you know, of why, how many more means subtraction, you know, with the concrete and pictorial. But at a certain point, we do want to just on an anchor chart to help remind the kids. So it's also like, this is an important concept that's going to come up all year long. So that anchor chart can become an instructional tool for all year long. So a good step would be to create an anchor chart that had, and you guys know the content, you can figure out on your own, like what's going to go on that anchor chart, just making sure that how many more indicates subtraction, right? Okay, and actually that relates to part B. So what would be the kind of like the micro objective for part B? Students will be able to what was the thing that they struggle with?
I feel like it was more of understanding the question as a whole, because how many they understood that they're gonna add, but like I said, the or is what confused them.
Even then though, like for like I'm thinking of my room, I guess going back to the whole applying the operation to the part B problem, what could they look at, like is that more focused to like the showing the word counts part of it, like the being able to create that expression?
Yeah, it could be. Oh, that's a really good point. Good catch. Show your work. Right. So, and I would say just because it says how many doesn't mean they knew to add it, because how many more than means subtract. So I think it's really understanding that a question word like this with the or means you're adding both options. So students will be understand that or can mean adding in a word problem about graphs. And then students will be able to show their work. So what are the strategies that you taught in terms of students showing their work on a problem like this?
For me, specifically connecting it to the bar graph, it's circling your quantities. So if you're going to be doing lilies and poppies, circling those numbers so you know beforehand which ones you're going to focus on, and then creating that being able to create the equation for that.
Okay, good.
Yeah, similar. Or I had some students who they still find it easier to draw it, so they can draw like the circles.
Okay, that works as well.
Yeah, we did that too. Using a picture as well. Yeah.
And they can also do the number bond, right?
The number bond.
Yeah. Okay, so those are 3 different options. And then when you're reteaching it, showing all 3 of those options is good, and the magic comes in connecting the 3 options together. All right. So did we do step 1? What do students need to understand and be able to do to solve the problem correctly?
Yes.
Yep. Step 2, what do you think students misunderstood in this question? Did you do that?
Yes.
All right. Now step 3. So we did the x-ray. Now we got to do the surgery. How and in using what will you reteach and reassess? What do you think the move is?
Well, for me, since that, I've been doing word problems, more exposure to word problems, and seeing quantities in like this format, because I feel like that's where my class got most confused. Like she was talking about the whole language, giving them more time and exposure to that. So in terms of like what I revisited or what I'm revisiting, it's like those keywords and identifying operations inside a word problem.
Okay, great.
Yeah, I think for me, it's still working with different types of graphs. So starting with the bar graph specifically, and then just reintroducing the different things they need to identify in the graph. So it's much more easier for them to understand even better which quantities they're using, which topic or flowers in this case.
Yeah.
They need to be looking at. That way they use only certain information and not all of the information.
Yeah, and so making sure that you're using a bar graph, or have you guys done pictographs yet?
Yes,
or not?
that was the first one.
So that's fair game as well. Like obviously, maybe emphasizing bar graphs, but you can also, again, it's about the concept. So using pictographs is okay as well. All right, and then as we said, using an anchor chart, right? So presenting a bar graph, using an anchor chart. Now, here's the other decision you can make. Basically, the two reteach methods that there are, and we'll go into this in more in depth in another part. It's called show call, and then another one is just direct modeling, where you're just like, this is how you do it. The benefit of show call, it's basically where you're putting the problem up there and showing an exemplar answer, or showing an answer that's incorrect. I mean, obviously you've got to get to showing the exemplar is helpful because the kids are then able to analyze like, what did this person do? And then it's, as we talked about, the student model is always good. And so you do have, as you can see, you do have students that got it right. So do you still have their tests or not? If you don't, it's totally cool.
Yeah,
I do have them
filed.
So what you could do is you can just grab a test where the student has done an exemplar job of 2A or 2B, and then project that.
Okay.
So essentially it's, you're projecting the problem, you're being very explicit about like, hey, the reason we're gonna look, we did this question from the test, this is one we struggled with, so we're gonna figure out how to improve our answers. And then you're gonna say, now I'm gonna put up a correct answer. Like we're gonna put up so-and-so's work. So-and-so, could you explain how you solved this? Wow. Or you can say, you can ask questions about the work and say, what did so-and-so do to solve this correctly? Right? So having the kids look at the exemplary response, and then where the teaching comes in is where you're talking about that micro objective. Okay. Where you're saying, you're putting up the anchor chart. Now, students, the mistake that a lot of you made was you weren't able to identify what operation we're doing, right? And then you direct them towards the anchor chart. Remember that, and then go back into the problem, and then you're giving them questions. And you're not saying like, so how many more means subtract? You're saying, you refer to the anchor chart, okay? Then you're asking them, what keywords do you see? Thumbs up when you know, think, pair, share, blah, blah. And so getting there through questioning. So you're giving like a little input, here's the anchor chart, here's the reminder, but then going back to the question and saying like, what do you notice, and connect to the anchor chart. Right? And then giving kids an opportunity to redo it. You can use the same problem and redo it. Although if you're gonna do that, you might not want to start with the exemplary response. And then repeating that for the second part, right? Where then you're zooming into, well, you're kind of doing it together, right? Because like, or would be up there, but maybe then you're pointing out like, here's why or can mean combining, right? All right. So when would it make sense to start reteaching? Within your schedule, I mean.
Yeah.
Maybe
In-
Thursdays, because I
in-
can elongate the time for math on minimum days.
Got it.
I think looking at like how it's structured on those refined days within the iReady lessons, where it's kind of touching upon already, like for that week, refining the little things, I think that would be the days I would want to use, also makes that extra time block for this.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now, resource-wise, here's what I recommend. You don't want to like create a whole new graph. You could just actually use the same graph, because rather than saying how many more daisies we're planting than tulips, you can say how many more poppies we're planting than lilies, how many more poppies than daisies, how many tulips or poppies, how many lilies, daisies, poppies in all, right? So just use the same graph. And then, you know, you can even use it. So there's plenty of graphs in the curriculum. It's just about like more like creating the questions about the graphs.
Okay.
All right. Then with the reassess thing, that doesn't have to be a big fancy thing either. It could be like, I'm going to give you one more problem, show me on your whiteboards.
Okay, I was gonna ask because they give us that Form B, but I'm like, for reassess, is it like to that
You
extreme,
could.
or
I mean,
is it? Yeah.
You could totally do that, but it's also like you can gauge students' understanding by simply using a whiteboard.
Yeah. Okay.
And then we can talk about spiral at another time, but for now, let's just stick with this. So did we do step 3? How when using what? All right. So do you want to? Is this week too much of a turnaround? Too quick of a turnaround? All right. You want to try it next week then?
Yeah.
All right. Will you let me know how it goes?
Yeah.
All right. Final question. Do you feel like you understand the process?
Yes.
Did you feel like you could do it for like other questions too?
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. So, and really just taking ownership of our data is the way to go, because it's also like, it's hard to monitor. A leader's not going to monitor like, oh, let me make sure the reteacher, like you guys just value it, own it, and do it on your own, right? So we can check in on it constantly, but like the more you guys are able to say like, okay, now, you know, question 12. And what I noticed is you don't have the same questions necessarily where students struggled. So sometimes you'll collaborate and sometimes you're going to do it on your own. So I used to be obsessive about that. Like, I want to see the assessments immediately, and it's like, oh, they bombed 11 and 15 or whatever. So I think once you get the excitement of seeing how the process works and like students, oh, now they're getting it, it kind of just motivates you to kind of like want to jump into that immediately. All right, 12:30.
Yeah.
That was quick.
It was.
All right. Thanks for engaging.
Thank you.
We'll see how the video looks. No filter though.
I noticed.
All right. Thanks, you guys. Appreciate it.